So welcome everybody to the Scinece4Peace Forum roundtable discussion on the war on Gaza. We mourn about the many people killed during this war and the previous attacks and wars. We condemn very strongly the war and request an immediate ceasefire, release of hostages, and request serious negotiations and a solution for a lasting peace for all people living in the Middle East. It may sound very naive, and we all know that the situation is very complicated and solutions are difficult to achieve. But there is no other way than negotiations and agreements for a lasting peace, I believe. Of course, every conflict has a history, and one must be aware of what has happened in the past to understand the present. We had already a good discussion about the Gaza war in October 2023, with a very good and interesting presentation from Johannsen from the Hamburg Institute for Peace Research and Security Studies, including a historical review. The situation in Gaza and the war has reached a stage now where one cannot stay silent. In many countries in Europe and the US, protests against the war were reaching also the universities and the science campus. Students were protesting against the war, setting up protest camps, occupying lecture halls, and demanding a serious discussion about the scientific cooperation with institutes in Israel. The Scinece4Peace Forum has protested in the past against cutting scientific cooperation with Russian and Belarusian science institutes, since we believe science offers a bridge for communication, even in times when other channels do no longer work. We have very strongly opposed and criticized the decisions of Science Institute, also of CERN, to cut cooperation with Russian and Belarusian institutes. It is very important that we talk to each other to understand the other side and to understand the narratives of the others. Talking to each other must be, of course, in respect of the other, in an atmosphere without racism, anti-Semitism, and any other form of anti-ism and otherism. The purpose of the roundtable discussion today is to hear arguments, other arguments, hear information which we might not have before. It is clear that not everybody must agree with what others are saying. This is the purpose of a discussion, but we must listen to the arguments and take them seriously. I believe we are all here today because we want that the killing of people must end immediately, and that we want to contribute that people can live in peace together, respecting each other. I'm very happy that so many people joined the discussion today, and especially I'm happy that many people agreed to report and give introductory statements. I'm very happy to welcome Ahmed Basalat, who is Professor of Physics at Al-Najjar National University Nablus in West Bank and member of the Atlas collaboration at CERN. He will give us some important insights on the daily life in the West Bank. Then we have Adam Keller from the Gush Shalom Peace Movement in Tel Aviv. He will tell us about peace activities in Israel and future prospects. We have Shia Hever from the Jewish Voice for Just Peace in the Middle East. He will tell us about activities for peace from people outside of Israel being against the occupation policy. And I'm very happy to welcome Noah Simon as a representative from the student protests in Princeton University, and Lee Mordechai, who is professor for history at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and present fellow in Princeton, and he followed the protest camps at Princeton. And last but not least, I'm very happy that Alice Ditucci, Rolf Bühler, Ufuk Akaya from DESY will tell us a bit about protests and some very unbalanced statements made by DESY. At around 6 p.m., Rick Sanders has invited a colleague to say a few words about their ideas for a peace process in the Middle East. I would propose that we start with the intro words of each, of about 10 minutes each, and then we enter the roundtable discussion. Please let everybody finish. I'm the only one allowed to interrupt. And please do not speak too long, so to let others also have a chance. We will come to an end of the discussion around 6:30. There are some further infos on the new slides available from our webpage, a link which I sent around in the chat window. Ahmed, please, the floor is yours.
So in the beginning, I'm saying maybe good morning or good afternoon for everybody. And thank you, Hans, and all people here in this forum that they are really discussing how to establish a way or a method to stop a war in Gaza. But what I would like even to add, stopping war even in West Bank as well. I cannot say that the situation in Gaza is extremely difficult, but the measure of the difficulty is still relative because near to 35 people have been killed until this moment there. But in West Bank, we have also near to 5,000 persons in prison for no any reason. And the movement of people is very limited, and the mobility is almost forbidden in circles not more than 10 kilometers diameter. The daily, actually, when I have been invited to speak about Palestinian issue or the war in Gaza or difficulties in West Bank, in Nablus in particular, or in Jenin or in other cities, I know that we have to give information or some scientific facts even in very limited time, but the story is very long. And we always, and I'm happy that I'm sure that I'm the least educated among maybe the majority of you are professors and very senior people, but we used to know in physics that it's important to understand reasons. Because when we understand reasons, we can think about solutions, and we can expect also, let me say, results. Today, actually, it comes is the anniversary of Palestinian Nakba of 48. It's 15 May. And even the story didn't start in 48. Maybe the big spark wasn't that date, but even we, or the origin of our story comes at least near to 30 years before it. I'm not going also to go to history, neither to go to reasons of, or direct reasons of a war, but I would like to share with you the story, I call it the story of my son, which summarize the daily life of each single Palestinian lives in Palestine. So I have only one son and two daughters. This son born in Paris and grown between CERN. He slept many times in building 304. He attended many meetings in SR1 and in Atlas control room in the days where I was doing my PhD in Atlas, namely in pixel detector. And he attended Atlas weeks either at CERN or either in abroad. One of them was in Morocco. He attended actually during his age. Now he is 14 years, sorry. And I was speaking when he was little 3, 4, 5 years. He attended international conferences and he was staying at CERN more than he was staying at home. He traveled between Geneva and Paris and Synchrotron Soleil, where also my wife, his mother, was doing her PhD. he participated in Partager le Savoir conference in Trieste in 6-7 years. Now, he's a school student. His daily life is exactly the following. He should wake up at 6 o'clock morning, and I must throw him on the checkpoint, dealing with soldiers, with arms, asking a permission to just pass by, to pass the checkpoint, to arrive to his school, which is less than 10 kilometers from my home. He should negotiate taxi drivers, and he should also negotiate these soldiers in order to let him pass and to be able to catch another taxi to go to his school. Unfortunately, in the entrance of the other village that he's going to, the road is closed simply by a gate. You can imagine inside this gate, sometimes you speak about near to 10,000 people, sometimes 30, 40,000 people. It's closed for them only by a gate with a key. This means that he cannot continue with the car or with the taxi that he took. So he should stop on the highway, and he should feel that he's in a real danger, because this highway is well known, I'm sorry, by colonists, and he should not be in a safest way. He should cross the road, walk again another 300, 200, 300 meters to look for another taxi to go to his school. The other kids, usually they wake up maybe at 7:30, and the only faces that they see, sorry, the teachers and their colleagues. However, this son, who is, well, I mean, he is Palestinian, but as well, he's a French citizen. And he has to suffer all this road away just to keep his lectures. The other way, that he should take the taxi from my home to the school, and which was in the first 2-3 months. However, he was leaving home like 6:30 morning, but he was each day arrives later than 11 morning. And usually the schools in Palestine finish by midday 30. So he was just doing the road. Why? Because he has to stop in a checkpoint for a few hours, waiting his turn. And at the end, no question, nothing, neither for him, neither for the other people in the car or in the taxi. This actually summarizes the other, let me say, the other Palestinians' life, which is my students in the university, or my colleagues, or even myself. A result for all these difficulties that we are facing nowadays for a mobility and movement, we are not able to run the universities. So since October, we turned out our education, or I mean our lectures, on Zoom. So Hans, when I was writing with you in the morning, I was forced to stop writing emails because I have to go to my lectures via Zoom. Why via Zoom? Because students cannot come to the university. As well, we as a university management and the municipality trying to reduce the friction or the interaction between our young people and, of course, Israeli soldiers or the colonists in the roads. So we stopped teaching, no physical presence of students since October until last month. And the semester that was supposed to finish by December, we ended by March. Then indirectly to all of that, people are not able to move. This means they are not able to work. This means they are not capable to bring money for their families. This is one reason. However, the second reason that whenever actually, Palestinian-Israeli peace cooperation in Oslo, it had been agreed that our workers were working inside Israel. So I'm trying really to touch points that even you cannot find them easily anywhere else, because it touched the daily and the real life. So in summary, we are speaking about near to, I don't know, maybe near to 30–40% of Palestinians are working inside State of Israel. One. The second 30 or 40%, of course, I'm not working in a statistical center, but more or less, it's like the other 1/3 working in a governmental sector of State of Palestine. So these two major pillars of people who are working, they are depending on, between brackets, on Israel. Why? Because the first portion, they must go inside Israel, work. However, the second one is working inside Palestinian hospitals and teachers of schools or teachers in the universities or engineers or medicine or hospitals, whatever, public sector. But their salary is coming from the State of Palestine. And the money for the State of Palestine, the majority of their money coming from taxes that collected for Palestinians by Israeli authority. But Israeli authorities decided since before October, since November 21, not to transfer this money to the state. This makes the economic system in a very threshold situation. No salary for people, neither public sector, neither teachers, neither medicines, neither, as I said, the workers inside Israel. Result, families are not able to support their kids to go to schools, neither to universities. The poor level in Palestinian cities comes to very critical percentages. Students are not able to pay their fees or tuitions to the universities. The universities are not able to collect this money to pay for us or for the university professors. And the universities as well, beside the whole governmental sector, are not able to pay salaries for their employees. The result is really a frustration for a lot of people. Temperature is very high, and this is really needed. Of course, thanks to your initiative and thanks to this very nice and very kind forum. And I hope others similar to really to take an action on our governments, on our politicians, that this war has to be stopped. And as well, which is the most important also, windows of hope must be opened for Palestinians in order trying to cool down this very high temperature which all of us are very afraid from the future of West Bank. I'm sorry that I took maybe a few minutes more, so I must stop here. I will be very happy to answer any question or to clarify any point.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for this very interesting and very important information. I was not aware of the situation, so it's really very important and very good that you came here and informed us about that. I would like to postpone all unimportant questions to the discussion afterwards. Only important ones right now. Rolf, do you have
it's just for understanding,
one,
so it should be very short. Thank you, Ahmed. Could you clarify this tax issue, which I had never heard? So these taxes are taken by the Israeli government where and why do they not get there? If it takes too long, we can postpone it.
No, it took maybe shortly. Simply, Palestinians are not controlling anything in their world. We don't have any borders except with Israel. We are not allowed to issue visa, neither importation, neither exportation, nothing, except via Israel. So imagine when we import or export goods or cars or whatever, or we should pay tax, right? Which is, to be honest, it's the only income for Palestinian government. These taxes, by a Paris agreement in 95, after Oslo by 2-3 years, stated that you as a Palestinian, you are not allowed to collect your taxes, your money. This is collected only by us as an Israeli authority. Then we, an Israeli authority, send it to you. Whenever we have any behavior from any Palestinian Israeli authority does not like, they just stop sending this money. Direct result in the first day of the upcoming month, no salary for the public sector in Palestine, which is our case now. And of course, this is, yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, I don't know how to say it, but this is like indirect war, actually, against Palestinians.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for clarifying. If there are no further very urgent questions, I would then like to invite Adam Keller from the Gush Shalom peace movement to say a few words on what is going on the peace movement in Tel Aviv. Adam.
Yes. Thanks for inviting me. And I will try to give them in brief the situation as it is here, which is a very bad situation and very complicated situation. Now, the first few months after October 7 were very, very difficult. It was the biggest wave of war, people wanting war in that I could remember in Israeli history, and you could very well see the reason for it after the terrible things which Hamas did on 7th of October, when they went into succeeded for one day to go into part of Israel and they kill people, rape women, kidnap people, burn houses. That created a very terrible reaction from Israeli public. There was very many people wanting revenge, and even people who are usually quite reasonable. I could hear from them very terrible things like we should destroy Gaza like Dresden was destroyed in the Second World War. it is a little bit comparable to what happened in European societies in 1940, in the beginning of the First World War, when suddenly there was a wave of warlike enthusiasm sweeping nearly everybody, and you could see when you were walking through an Israeli city, you could everywhere see the slogan, "Together we will win, victory, victory, victory," everywhere. You could see big signs, small signs, government signs, municipality signs, companies publishing "Together we will win," and under it the logo of the company, and also very innocent things of children who were writing this "Together we will win" with very much love, and writing every letter with different color. Of course, children are following what their grown-ups are suggesting to them. And it was really a feeling of suffocation for somebody who did not want this war. And in the beginning, it was even very difficult to make any demonstrations against the war. The police said, the minister in charge of the police is now an extreme right racist. And the police first said, "We will just not allow any demonstration against the war." Any demonstration against the war was immediately broken up by very much violence by the police. So it was very, very difficult to make any demonstration against the war. There was needed very much courage to go out in the street against the war, and only very small number of people did it. But the situation now, after more than half a year of the war, is very much changed in the Israeli public opinion. There is now very much division in the public opinion. You could say there were several things. First of all, that the war is not going very well, that the Israeli army, after more than half a year, has not yet succeeded to conquer the whole of the Gaza Strip. And there is very often the army has to go again and again to the same place which they already conquered. And then they find that they have more reason to fight there again. That is typical of guerrilla war, of course. When the army is conquering a territory, but there is guerrilla war, then suddenly they find that they have to conquer the same thing, the same place, second time, and the third time, and the fourth time. And now the Israeli army is already going for the third time into places in the Gaza Strip which they conquered already half a year ago, and which they thought was under their control. They found out that it's not under their control. And there are more and more Israeli soldiers getting killed, and Israeli people mostly are, unfortunately, very much indifferent to the suffering of Palestinians. That is very terrible to see, that you see very often people who are saying, "I don't care that children are getting killed in Gaza. I only care about our children." That is very terrible, inhuman attitude. But Israelis are very much caring about the life of their own soldiers, and when nearly every day you hear of more soldiers getting killed, and you see photos of a very, very young, very nice young man who has been sent to Gaza and is now dead. That is hitting the people, making people feel very bad. I remember there was a mother who told with very much tears of her son. He was on 6th of October in the evening. He was phoning her and saying, "Oh, mother, I'm so bored. I went into the army to fight, not to be in a very boring place where nothing happens." And then on the following day, he had got 1 hour of fighting, and then he was dead. It was 12 hours after he told his mother, "I'm bored and I want to fight." He was already dead. And I mean, you hear more and more stories of these stories of mothers, of fathers, of brothers, of the families of soldiers, and that is very much affecting people. Of course, I would like more people in Israel to care also about the terrible things which happen to Palestinians, but and we do our kind of people. We have small groups of people who are saying a child is a child, and a child in Gaza who is killed by Israeli bombs is just as dead as an Israeli child who was killed by Hamas. But I can't say that we get this kind of position very widely supported in Israeli public opinion. But the caring about the soldiers, that is hitting very much the mainstream of the Israeli society. And then there is very much the question of the hostages, the more than 100 Israelis who were captured by Hamas in the 7th of October and taken into Gaza. And their families have a very much moral force in the Israeli society, and the families are demonstrating every day nearly, and they get very much support. You now have tens of thousands of people demonstrating with the families of the hostages and saying, bring them back immediately, make some deal. And of course, and let's say these demonstrations of the families of the hostages are not officially demonstrations against the war, but in practice they are demonstrations against the war, because everybody knows that the only way to get the hostages back is to make some kind of deal with Hamas, and what Hamas wants in exchange for giving back these hostages is that Israel will stop the war. So there is we now don't have anymore the unanimity which we had in the beginning of the war, that everybody was saying war, let's destroy Hamas. That was in the beginning, it was very much like that. Now the Israeli society is very much divided. There are forces of people who want the war to continue, who are happy to see dead Palestinians, but there are more and more people who are against this war, or dislike it, or just think that this war is futile and will not succeed, and so we should stop with it. So this is an improvement over. The situation is still very bad. I can't say that I'm very happy with the situation. It's a terrible situation. There are still terrible things happening in the Gaza Strip all the time, and also bad things happening in the West Bank, not as bad as in Gaza, but there is a terrible oppression in the West Bank also. And there is very much fascist forces active inside the Israeli society. Fascist, racist forces are very openly saying the most terrible things, and trying to push the most terrible things, but they are not. But they are not anymore dominant. There is a strong forces fighting against them, and there is also very much, of course, the international dimension. There is all the demonstrations around the world, in the universities in the United States, now also in Europe. And there is Biden is making very clear that he doesn't like Israel to continue this war, and there is the extreme step from his part saying that he will not anymore send bombs for Israel to destroy Palestinian neighborhoods, and that is also making people more hesitant about the war. When the war first was looking like it is a success and the whole world is supporting us, then people were also saying, okay, we can fight, we can make this war, and the whole world is behind us, like it was on the first weeks after 7th of October. Now there is very much international opposition, and there is very much United States and Europe is more and more showing their reservation about the war, their opposition to the war. And some people in Israel saying, oh, this is all anti-Semitism. All the demonstrations against Israel are anti-Semitic demonstrations. But then you tell them, but do you know that in these demonstrations, which you call anti-Semitic, there are very many Jews participating, and that there are many young Jews in the United States who are saying, if this is what the state of the Jews is doing, then I, as a Jew, I don't want to have anything to do with the state of the Jews. So what I can say in summary, it is a very difficult situation, but it is not a hopeless situation. We are struggling. We are demonstrating. There was just this week there was the official memorial day for the fallen soldiers. That is every day on the day before the Israeli Independence Day. But there were official memorials organized by the government. And then, first of all, in these official memorials, there was very much protest. For example, when Prime Minister Netanyahu started to speak in the official memorial in Jerusalem, then very many of the families, the bereaved families of dead soldiers, just went away. They say, we don't want to hear Netanyahu. He's responsible for this terrible war, and we don't want to hear him. And also there were several alternative memorials, which were joint memorials of Israelis and Palestinians. And there was very heartwarming, inspired speeches of people who were Israelis and Palestinians who have lost family members in this war, these terrible wars, and they spoke about it, and they say, I am speaking as a bereaved parent, bereaved brother, bereaved mother, and I don't want revenge. I don't want more people to die. My lesson as a bereaved family, bereaved mother, bereaved father, is that I want to make peace. I want no more bloodshed, no more bereavement. So that is what I can say in conclusion. The situation is very bad, but it is not hopeless. There are forces opposing the war, opposing all this bloodshed, opposing all the terrible things which are happening. These forces are becoming stronger. We are struggling. We are not letting the bastards, the terrible racists, and all the people who want war. We don't let them win. We are struggling against them every day, every hour. Even today, after I finish this talking with you, I'm going to a vigil in Tel Aviv, which will be again stop the war in Gaza, bring back the hostages, no more war, no more bloodshed. Now that's what I can tell to this. I hope that this is a useful contribution to your discussion.
Thanks a lot, Adam. This was very interesting and very important, and I'm extremely happy to hear that the peace movement is again starting to grow and doing something against this war. This is really very good. I was reading our messages just after the October 7th, where you were also very much frustrated about the situation, and now I think things are becoming a bit better than that. There is again some people rising up against the war. Then this is really very good and very positive, and is important. Are there any immediate important points to Adam?
This is Michele. Can
Yes,
I
Michele.
ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Adam, for your presentation. Since Netanyahu is going beyond the auto-defense right allowed to democracy, liberal democracy, there is a suspicion that he has a secret plan to push the Palestinians out of Gaza and let the colonists to reach the sea. Is this suspicion valid according to your opinion? Thank you.
I don't know if this was a question directed to me, but I want to say, I think there was a very clearly such a plan. The plan was obviously to first to push the people from the North Gaza Strip to the South Gaza Strip to Rafah, and then to push them across the border into Egypt. And I think that this failed because of General Sisi, the president of Egypt, and I think that he did not. He made very clear that this is out of the question. He will not allow any Palestinians to go into Egypt, or very, very few. He will not allow millions of Palestinians to go into Egypt. I think that he did not do it so much out of concern for the Palestinians. General Sisi is a very brutal dictator. He's a man who massacred more than 800 Egyptian citizens in the street of Cairo in order to consolidate his power. But he is afraid that outpouring of millions of Palestinians into Egypt will start a revolution in Egypt, and this revolution could end his rule. And because he is an egoist dictator who wants to keep his power, for a change, he did something very good, which is to stop the plan of Israel to do ethnic cleansing and to push the Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip. And I think that as long as this is the position of General Sisi, then Israel just has no chance to do it. But certainly, I think that people in the Israeli government and the Israeli army had exactly this plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Sonia, put up your hand.
Adam, thank you very much. Just a very brief comment from the position in the US. The US government is not opposing Israel's war, it's just making noises. When you look up what Blinken said yesterday, it's very clear this is just political rhetoric.
Okay, thanks a lot for clarifying. Thanks a lot, Adam, for this very important contribution. We are running a bit late, but I think it's important to hear these expressions and words, and I don't want to limit the time of the people who have to say some very important messages. So even if we are running late, I think it's very important then that we take the time to listen what people are saying. The next on my list would be Shia Hever from the Jewish Voice for Just Peace in the Middle East. Shia, the floor is yours then.
Thank you for inviting me. I will try to speak directly into the point to save us some time. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that I was the original plan was to have a colleague of mine, Ina Michaeli, speak to you, and because she was not able to make it, I'm taking her place, and we have this very unfortunate situation where all three speakers are men, and also the audience we have is not very balanced. Yeah, it's and I also want to say that because today is Nakba Day, and it's very important to acknowledge this. I, as a Jew who grew up in Israel, of course, it's not my place to explain to you what is the Nakba, but I can tell you a little bit about my own family history in relation to the Nakba. My grandfather participated in the ethnic cleansing and the massacre in the city of Lydda, which is called Lod today. If any of you have ever visited Israel, you must have used the Ben Gurion airport, which is very close to that city. And in the month of April 1948, the Israeli, or not really the Israeli, but let's say the Zionist militia at the time, the Palmach, expelled the population of Lydda, who had to march on foot all the way to the West Bank. Those who were not able to march took shelter in the mosque. The old, the sick, the pregnant women. The Palmach soldiers then proceeded to burn the mosque with everyone inside and to kill them all. And then they gathered some Palestinian men that they found in the area and forced them to dig graves twice, once for themselves and once for the corpses in the mosque. Now, my grandfather admitted those facts, but I only learned of them after my grandfather died. And I think we have to know about these stories on Nakba Day, which were denied and repressed for many, many years. And as scientists, it's something that we should be concerned about, because it was only people only started to believe the stories of Palestinians about the Nakba when it was Jewish Israeli historians who opened the archives of the Israeli military in the 1980s, the so-called new historians, and started to publish those stories. I have another story for you from my family, this time from my grandmother, who told me once after the war, after the Second World War, in which the family had to escape from Poland. Those who did not escape were murdered in Auschwitz, but those who escaped survived. And she said, after the war, we came back to Poland, we got our property back, we sold it, we got our passport back, but I don't understand why Palestinians who were expelled or who escaped during the war of 1948 were never allowed to return in the same way that we were able to return. And I think this is the question that means that the Nakba is not something that just happened in 1948. It's an ongoing Nakba, and it continues until today. But when we talk about what's happening in Gaza now, I think to talk about it just as a continuation of the Nakba is not really something that is enough. We have to acknowledge what is happening in Gaza. And it's not a second Nakba, it's something new, in my opinion. And I feel compelled to say that this is a genocide. I know it's a very big word to use and a very strong word, but and I also would say that, of course, as a group of scientists here, it's not easy to just accept a statement like this. There are definitions of what is a genocide, and the key point is the intention to commit genocide. The key point is the dehumanization of an entire group of people. And I don't want to take the time now to make the arguments to you, because you are researchers, you are able to find the arguments very clearly in the lawsuit that was filed by South Africa against Israel in the International Court of Justice, where these facts have been laid. If somebody has a question, I can of course go into details, but I of course have to acknowledge that from my point of view, I'm not making a scientific statement, this is genocide because it fits the definition of genocide. I'm making a statement that based on my own family history and the stories that I heard from my family about what they experienced as dehumanization and the intention to exterminate an entire group of people, then the use of hunger as a weapon of war, these things are absolutely genocide in the world that I grew up in. But I want to say that the contributions by Ahmed and by Adam were very important and very useful. I do feel that one thing that is very sorely missing in them is the question, what are we supposed to do about it? What are we going to do now, and what CERN should do? So there was, of course, the question about cutting ties with Israeli academia. I want to acknowledge the fact that Adam, I very much appreciate, I'm still getting your emails every week. I know how important the work that you're doing in order to call for a ceasefire and to find the very small voices in Israel that are willing to call for a ceasefire. And I'm not belittling that work that you're doing, but you never use the word genocide, and you haven't used the word genocide in your presentation now either. And I'm not accusing you of that, because the situation in Israel right now is that of no more freedom of speech. Israel is an apartheid state, which did have freedom of speech for Jews, but not for Palestinians, which means Palestinians could not express their opinion without being arrested. But now we are in a different situation in which Jews can also not express their opinion without being arrested. And we have Jewish activists who were arrested for much smaller things than acknowledging the genocide. We have a history teacher who was accused of treason because he said that people have a right to live on both sides. We have journalists who had to escape from their apartments because there are calls to murder them. So they were not arrested. It's like mob justice. It's not the police that is after them. It's right-wing extremists. But in a situation in which there is no freedom of speech, we cannot talk about academic research. And we cannot say any. So now we have a situation in Israel in which there are demonstrations against economic ties, academic ties with Israeli universities. In universities around the world, and protest encampments in the best universities in the world, the most famous universities in the world. And the university managements in most of these universities, not in all of them, but in most of them, respond by expelling the students, calling the police to remove the encampments, refusing to abide by the demands of the students. These actions actually are undermining these universities very much. They are taking the critical voices within the university, the students who have the most interest in addressing a reality, even though that is a very unpleasant reality, and addressing unpleasant truths and responding to that by kicking out those critical students and leaving only the students who are willing to obey by the rules, not ask critical questions. I don't think these students will make the best scientists of the future. And that's something that you have to consider as well as scientists in CERN. I should also say that Adam said something very important about revenge. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Israeli military has systematically bombed and destroyed each and every institution of higher learning in the Gaza Strip. Every college, every university was destroyed. This is an act of scholasticide. And this is an act that makes a lot of us maybe angry, a lot of the students, activists very angry. But I appeal to you not to think in terms of revenge. The Palestinian movements for freedom and for justice are not saying, let's destroy the Israeli academia because Israel is destroying Palestinian academia. They're saying, let's take measured action with very clear goals in order to achieve a change, a political change in the situation, to end the genocide, to achieve a ceasefire, to end the injustice, and to give Palestinians the very basic academic freedom that Ahmed has shown us that does not exist in any part of Palestine. So there are campaigns to do that. For example, the campaign called No Tech for Apartheid, which is very important because the big tech companies, I'm talking about Meta, which is censoring Palestinian voices. I'm talking about Google and Amazon, which are providing Israel with computing technology, the Nimbus project with the Israeli military, which is used as part of the genocide. There's also a growing campaign about the use of AI by the Israeli military in order to create mass numbers of targets and killing up to 100 uninvolved civilians with every bomb strike against a so-called target, somebody that they want to assassinate, by using AI, which is provided by companies like Palantir. And of course, research, academic research is part of developing this technology. So these are existing campaigns. What these campaigns have in common is that they are a part of the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions. And the BDS movement is, once again, this is very important to reiterate. It's not a call to boycott Israelis just because they're Israelis. That's very important, that exactly what you said in the beginning, Hannes, that we do not tolerate any kind of racist or anti-Semitic or any other kind of exclusionary discourse. The point is to target the institutions which are complicit with the crimes. The Israeli universities, which are now expelling Palestinian students every day because of their social media posts calling to end the war, or which are participating in development of weapons for the Israeli military. So it's a call for academic boycott with a very clear goal to target the institutions for their crimes and not individuals just because they belong to these institutions. And this is about the method of the boycott movement, and the goals of the boycott movement are also clearly defined. It's not boycott to cut academic ties forever and until this Israeli academia will not exist anymore, but it is simply until international law will be observed. And because today is Nakba Day, it's important to just mention the three demands of the BDS movement, which are equal rights to all the citizens of the State of Israel, an end of the occupation, and the right of return of the Palestinian refugees, the same refugees that my grandmother asked, why are they not allowed to return to their homes? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very good and very important contribution. Thanks very much. This is touching very much. Adam.
Yes, I would like to refer to this point which Shir mentioned. First of all, I want to say that there is a gradual improvement. We are in the beginning of the war. There was a very brutal effort to close up the democratic, you could say, the democratic space in the Israeli society, to arrest people for speaking their mind, or to throw them out of their jobs. And gradually we are pushing back this. And in the very recent example connected with Nakba, there was going to be a demonstration to commemorate Nakba Day in Tel Aviv University. The police say that they are forbidding it, and then the Civil Rights Association went to the Supreme Court on behalf of the students, and the police had to give in, and this ceremony for marking the Nakba Day in Tel Aviv University has taken place a few hours ago with hundreds of people, and the right-wing people were very angry, but the protest did take place. So I can say that gradually we are reestablishing the basic democratic freedoms in Israel and pushing back the attempts to stifle these voices. And I have to say that after some hesitation, the judges of the Israeli Supreme Court do act as guardians of basic democratic rights. They were in the beginning of the war, they were hesitant about it, but now there is again and again, the police is trying to do something very repressive, or police, or all kind of institutions, and the Supreme Court is interfering and telling them no, the people have freedom of speech, people have freedom of demonstration. So that is very important to mention. But about the point of the genocide, it is true that I'm not using the term genocide, and that is not because I'm afraid. I mean, if I would have felt that it is needed to cry out, Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip, I would have said it, and if it would have caused me to be arrested, then I would have taken this as a price to say. I think that this what the position is, a position of South Africa in international court was not that South Africa said Israel is already at this second committing genocide. South Africa said Israel is doing things which could lead to genocide unless the international community will very strongly interfere and stop Israel from doing it. And I quite share this position of South Africa. There were certainly the Israeli policies were leading in the direction which could have culminated with genocide. I have a feeling that to a considerable degree it was stopped. For example, that the policy of hunger, there was very much international pressure on Israel to allow more and more humanitarian supplies into Gaza. And in this, I must say I think the United States government did have an important and positive role. I think that the situation in Gaza is certainly not yet satisfactory. It is a terrible situation, but I think that I have a feeling that the danger of mass starvation with a lot of people dying is very, very possibly averted. And I think, let's say 35,000 people killed out of 2 million is a terrible, terrible situation. It is a terrible crime, war crime, especially a war crime because so many children were killed. I would say 35,000 out of 2 million is not yet genocide, and I hope it will not become genocide. So I have to say I several times used the word genocide in saying this situation could lead to genocide. I did not go as far as saying this situation right now is genocide.
Okay, thanks a lot, Adam. Their immediate further comments, replies. Shia, please.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to open now a discussion about pros and cons in genocide. This is more a discussion for legal experts and not for us. But I do think that one thing that is relevant for our discussion is the question of the media freedom in Israel and the self-censorship that the Israeli media channels are using. And I think, Adam, your interpretation of the lawsuit by South Africa is reflected, indeed, in the articles that I read in Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper. But I also read the actual text by South Africa, and the text is different. It's and I'm also in touch with my friends and my family in Israel, who are really telling me what is their perception of reality. This is a very dangerous and very scary situation in which people really believe, for example, that the case in the International Court of Justice is already over and Israel already won, so there's nothing to worry about. So it's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, and of course disinformation is not just used by the Israeli government. Hamas is also spreading disinformation. We cannot. But there is one Israeli journalist who made a special documentary to say 99% of the world's population is living in illusions, and they don't see the reality, but the only ones who can see the reality are the ones living in Israel. And I think maybe that's true. Actually, in some part of me very much wants it to be true, that maybe I will find out that all these more than 35,000 people who were killed in Gaza, more than 12,000 of them children, are really not dead. Maybe they're just sleeping. Maybe the whole numbers were fake. That would be a very big relief. But I fear that this is not the case. So we have to really address the facts, address the evidence that lies in front of us. And whether we call it genocide or not, we still have a responsibility to stop it.
That I absolutely agree.
Okay. Thanks very much. Yes. I don't see any further questions. Maybe then I ask Lee Mondrichai to say a few words on how he sees the situation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I am an Israeli historian. I'm currently on sabbatical in Princeton, so I'm here for 1 year. And before kind of like going through what is going on in Princeton, I do want to refer to some of the earlier discussion. I happen to agree with Shir that what is going on right now in Gaza is genocide. I've written about it quite a lot. Yeah, I've documented the evidence that I've found. I've published it both on my Twitter and my Academia EDU. I could send the link after I finish speaking. But basically, my argument as for genocide is both because of the numbers of dead and wounded, which we've reached somewhere around 5% of the population of the Gaza Strip is either dead or wounded. And these are the people we know, or the other people we don't know. And the strangling of the Gaza Strip with regards to allowing humanitarian aid in. And this is a thing, I mean, that's happening on multiple levels of society. There was like a reference earlier as if things were somehow ameliorating. I'm not sure that the evidence I'm seeing supports that. I mean, yes, April was better than March, but if we look, for example, at over the days of May 6th to May 12th, which is the last data I was able to find, so about a week in early May, only 6 truckloads entered Gaza, 6 in total over that week, right? Whereas the situation before the war was, we were talking about 500 a day, right? So we could discuss more about that if people are interested. I also agree with Shir with regards to the freedom of speech in Israel, but I do think there are levels of freedom of speech, right? So Jews can technically speak more freely than Palestinians. As for whether things are becoming better, so I guess you could be optimistic and say that, but only yesterday it was like a piece about the teacher who was suspended for just being in a Nakba commemoration with Palestinian flags. And this was done in so both the municipality of that teacher in central Israel and the Ministry of Education both agreed that I think it was she was supposed to be suspended. She was suspended. There's been an increase in censorship, right? So only today, if I remember correctly, there was a piece that pointed out that in 2023, the almost 4 times as many pieces were censored, completely censored, as in stopped, were not published. If we want to look at the information, or really the strategy of managing information about what is going on in Gaza, I think we cannot ignore the fact that within the Gaza Strip, there actually have been no independent, no journalists, right? The only people who are reporting from within the Gaza Strip are Gazans themselves, with, again, coming from their perspective, but also they do not have the same power that a journalist that is associated with, let's say, the New York Times or the Guardian or CNN or the Washington Post would have. And again, there's a good reason for not allowing those journalists in. Israel not allowing journalists in, that is, of course. So maybe that's like kind of like the broad overview. As for Princeton, so again, Noah covered a lot of what I was thinking about. I think we are currently in the 21st day of the encampment. I mean, based on my experience, kind of like observing from the outside and speaking to people, the organization has been entirely student-led. There have been some faculty for support and so on, but I mean, it's really student-led. It is my sense that it's pretty clear that the university has and continues to actively work against the protests. And there's a lot of, I guess, local stories going on here. But for example, before the protests even started, the entire documentation of the organizers was leaked. It was leaked online, and in response, the vice president for campus life threatened in an email to the entire university community that anyone violating Princeton's protest rules would be arrested immediately and removed from campus. And then the next day, when the protests actually did what they were planning to do, exactly that happened. Right? So in 5 or 10 minutes, 2 students were arrested, evicted from their houses, and expelled from the university. There was no process involved or anything like that. So, I mean, there is a sense in which the administration is clearly not happy, to say the least, in this protest, with these protests. We've seen other students being arrested, evicted, and expelled. The university, as far as I can tell, the university started speaking with protesters only about 2 weeks into the protest. And that was also in the context of a hunger strike that a group of 13 students here started. And they recently stopped that after 9 days and have like another group of students who have replaced them. So, I mean, in my sense, there's not a lot of dialogue that the university is interested in, despite a significant amount of faculty who are sympathetic to the protest, or at least to what the protesters are going through with regards to, I mean, really the free speech. And I'll point to a few other things that may hopefully would be of interest to people here. And just because being within the encampment or around the encampment while seeing whatever is being said on the media and media about these encampments it was kind of a surreal experience for me. So one is anti-Semitism. So for all my time, both inside and around the encampment, speaking to people on both sides and so on, I saw or heard nothing anti-Semitic. There are many Jews who were among the student organizers. There's kosher food there. There have been Shabbat services in the encampment. One can speak Hebrew openly. When I speak to people there, I regularly identify as Israeli. Israeli parents bring their children there and speak to them in Hebrew. So this doesn't really seem to be a dangerous place in any way. And I think it's important to again, point that out as well. I think that the organizers do their best to remove things that seem controversial and draw attention away from their main point. And I can give a couple of examples. So one is the use of the term intifada. So early on in the protests, they sometimes use the word intifada or intifada revolution in chants. And then during the second day of the encampment, a Jewish student organizer wrote in the university's newspaper that they've decided to drop that chant because they feel that some people might get the wrong idea, specifically about anti-Semitism. So I mean, this kind of like reflection and willingness to kind of like direct their messaging, I found is useful, if not also inspiring. The other incident is that on the first day of the protest, there was what I understand to be a high school boy from the broader community who brought a Hezbollah flag and kind of like had the flag within the protest. This was quickly portrayed in Israeli media specifically as Hezbollah flags in the plural in Princeton. In reality, the flag was there for only a few minutes, and the organizers with whom I've spoken immediately approached the boy and requested that he remove the flag, which he did. And as far as I know, there have been no similar incidents since then. As for knowledge, and again, this is maybe more in Israeli media, I guess, but students tend to be portrayed as ignorant or unknowledgeable enough of what is actually going on in Gaza. That has not been the case based on my experience. So the students I've seen and spoken to are very knowledgeable. Many of them actually study the region. And the very first feature of the encampment was a library. It was a library of books about the conflict, the region, and associated topics such as decolonization. And then the lectures in the encampment, the reading groups, the discussion groups, it could all be very specific, right? So one of these could be one of the topics that people discuss could be something like how Israel treats its Ethiopian and Eritrean foreign workers, right? So this is coming from a position of knowledge rather than of ignorance. As for violence, again, as far as I know, there's been 0 cases of violence on the protesters' side. And as for the student discomfort, which is often may be cited as an argument against these protests, I mean, I find this argument hard to accept because in the context in which students believe that a genocide is taking place in Gaza, and again, you don't have to accept that this is a genocide, but I think that the International Court of Justice has said that it is plausibly a genocide, right? So the students are justified in believing that belief, in holding that belief. So within that context, and because students also believe that their government, the US government, is closely complicit in this genocide, and again, here there's also a lot of supporting evidence, what exactly should we expect them to do, right? I mean, if the stakes are so high, of course, their protest must be loud and must be uncomfortable, right? They're doing exactly what they should be doing as students who are aware of what is going on in the world and the responsibility of their own country. So I find it hard to judge them on that, on like the discomfort that these protests are causing to some people. As to what we should do as academics, I mean, I believe that it's our responsibility to be informed. So read wide and critically, understand that mainstream media, such again as the New York Times or the Washington Post, are just not good enough, and that we have to both read critically and also complement that with anything from reports, NGOs, and other sources of information that we believe we can trust based on critically reflecting on them. And I think it's also our obligation to speak out within our communities. Again, as an obligation as academics, as quote unquote public intellectuals or intellectuals. I don't think we can afford to stay silent in this regard. And again, we can debate things, and maybe debate is probably better to have, but staying silent as too many institutions and individuals, at least in my circle, the circles that I frequent within academia, have preferred to do over the past 7 months, I think is not conducive to solving anything, and is not really appropriate. So thanks again for having me here.
Thanks a lot, Lee. This was very, very important and very good. I must say, when I read a few statements from different protest camps, I also had the impression that people are extremely well informed and extremely well educated and think very deeply on this subject. So in contrary to what is transported in some of the media. So this was very important what you were saying, and I think it's very good also to hear and also very promising that younger people take the action and do something in that respect. This is extremely good. Are there any further questions to Lee and Noah? I don't see any hands up. Then I guess we could have a short report by Rolf on what has been happening at DESY. Rolf, are you still around?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes,
yes, I'm happy too. I really enjoyed so far. I want to say thanks to all the speakers. I will be quite brief. So I'm Rolf Bühler. I work at a science lab, DESY, one of the biggest physics science labs in Germany. At a smaller part next to Berlin, the big part is in Hamburg. I tell you all of this so you understand a bit the story of what happened here. We've had a very, it started with the Ukraine war, but now a directorate here in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that is very political. So they send out statements in the name of all workers. They did this on the 7th of October, supporting all the Israeli civilians, which of course everybody agreed with. But then when the invasion in Gaza started, and even after 10,000 of civilian deaths already, they did not do equivalent statements in the other direction. And even worse than that, they in November, they hissed the Israeli flag on our entrance, followed by statements from our director per email to all workers that we stand with Israel. This triggered resistance of several of our scientists here. We are a bit older than the students, so this is mostly postdoctorals and some younger staff that pushed back on this. This was an open email exchange on our institute list. Then there was no, I will make a longer story short, there was no change in policy from the directorate, so we protested in the form of a bike, first with a Palestinian flag and then with a peace flag and some Palestinian paintings that we put below the flag, the Israeli flag, a bike that we parked right below it. That first the Palestinian one they took away pretty quickly, but then the peace flag bike managed to stay for several months till they took it down. Now we started an open letter asking for equal treatment of civilians. We are very concretely affected by this. I should say there is really a concrete context, a bit like what was mentioned from Princeton. We work together here on projects with Elbit, one of the major military companies in Israel, on astronomical projects, so not military projects, but nevertheless, there is potential for, let's say, spying satellite technologies being developed together. This can be argued. Other people would tell you differently, but this is my view. This is one context. So we have many Israeli colleagues, but we also have Palestinian colleagues here. And this, of course, then with this flag and these statements created a very one-sided bad situation that we fought against. We had some success. Then we wrote an open letter that 160 people signed. Then the flag was exchanged for a flag where now it's written not the Israeli flag anymore. It's written "Never Again Is Now," and they removed the statement from the webpage. It was a longer fight. Even so we achieved something, it didn't feel like a big win, of course, because it's such a minor thing compared to the horrors that are happening. And I'm telling you all of this not only because of us here. Of course, this is quite typical for several science labs, particularly in Germany. The situation is very bad. You are immediately confronted with anti-Semitism claims, hidden ones and direct ones. And so it's a very, also Germany is a hard place to fight for these very, very basic things. So we never ask for anything else than just equal treatment of our colleagues and civilian casualties. So this is the absolute basic demand that one can make, and nevertheless, it took a big fight. And maybe in view of the time, I stop here. Everything was written up in an article recently, so I will post it in a chat. Unfortunately, it's in German, but I think modern browsers can translate. There's more detail there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rolf, for this nice and short overview of what has happened, but still very important to remember and to know what has happened at DZ. Are there any comments, any questions to Rolf on this issue?
Just quickly from my side, because I need to leave. Thank you very much, Rolf. You have achieved more than we did in MPG. And MPG is also a major problem Max Planck society, because it, via Minerva, a long-term program, it cooperates with Israeli universities and their claims, including military research. But we try to organize.
Thanks a lot. I don't see any other hands up. Mahmoud, you put up your hand.
Thanks, Hans, and thanks, Rolf, also for the nice overview, actually, for what happened at DZ, where also I am there at the moment, so near Berlin, DZ Zoithin, so I'm Mahmoud Al-Awashra, postdoc in the theory group at DZ Zoithin. I'm originally from the West Bank, from a small village north to Ramallah, where my family and also my friends is directly impacted of what have been happening even so since October 7th and before October 7th. So my father is a math teacher in the West Bank, so it took him quite a long time actually to also even become a math teacher, because he was studying Bachelor of Economics at Najah University, where Ahmad Basalat have been talking. Thanks for him. So he stopped, unfortunately, in the first Intifada because the Israeli army closed that university in 1987. And so it wasn't straightforward for him to come back after 10 years and then continuing to study mathematics at Al-Quds Open University, and then becomes a math teacher. And even though at the moment, because of what Ahmad's mentioned also, that this kind of tax sanctions on the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, he is kind of directly impacted by this. And so this is nothing actually compared to what really happens happening in Gaza at the moment. I had many colleagues who are from Gaza that I met throughout my scientific journey in Europe, since I did my master's and PhD as well in Europe. And so even when I started my postdoc already 5 months ago at DISY, and what I was supposed to do mainly here is to do science, but even though just few weeks after I started, it was confronted by this basically strong political statements from my institute itself, which I'm supposed to just do science in the first place at. And as Rolf mentioned, it took quite an effort from employees here just to have the basic conditions for a work environment without politicization of the campus. So thanks for the time.
Thanks very much, Mahmoud, for this additional information. Then this is very, very important. Thanks very much. Are there any further points? I don't see any hands up. Not then, I think, Rick, you have invited a colleague from you to say a few words about your ideas or the ideas of the peace coalition or peace process in the Middle East. So I would hand over now to you. Rick?
Okay, well, I'm Jason Ross, and you're answering one of the big questions that came up here. What do we do now? How do we get peace? And Jason is a science advisor in the Children Institute, and he's extremely confident. You'll see in what we're proposing that we need to benefit both parties, as in the Australia, particularly good.
Okay.
So Jason, I see your picture, but are you still there? It looks like he's trying to unmute Thomas. I don't know if there's a technical problem.
Hi.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry about that. I had another call that came in right as. So I wanted to address very briefly some rays of hope that Ahmed had called for in his opening presentation by thinking through how the situation in the region can benefit from broader trends and from a sort of technical or scientific approach to development of the region to give a different vision of what the future of the area could be. I think that what we have seen on the campuses definitely illustrates very dramatically the strong conflict between the motivations, the intentions, the actions of the students, and the repression that has been applied against them as part of a general exception to free speech in the US, the Palestinian exception, as seen in the unconstitutional laws that some states have passed forbidding participation in the BDS activities for employees, contractors, and so forth. Globally, changes not seen in centuries are underway. Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar has just said the other day that US dominance, in effect since the Cold War, has really come to an end. We see South Africa, a member of the BRICS nations, a developing country so-called, taking the lead in fighting at the ICJ to use that approach to stop the bloodshed and to supply humanitarian assistance. So the need for a new paradigm in the US is very strong. It's basically impossible to envision a US that stops supporting what's taking place in the military actions by Netanyahu. It's hard to imagine that stopping while continuing to have anti-Russia provocations, anti-China provocations. I mean, there needs to be a new paradigm overall on this. And I'd like to show a couple of slides of a development perspective for the region, which, if insisted on, supported by the international community, I believe could change the prospects for achieving peace. So this is the OASIS plan, as it was first named by Lyndon LaRouche in the 1970s. The primary component of this is to address the greatest enemy of everybody living in the region, which is not each other. The greatest enemy is the desert. Precipitation levels are extremely low. Water availability, water consumption is, among the Palestinians, exceptionally low. For West Bank Palestinians not connected to the water grid, only 1/10 the water use of Israelis, including West Bank settlers. So what can be done to address the water aspect of the political tensions, which are very pronounced in particular in the Golan Heights, where Israel sees not only military reasons to exert control over the region, but also to prevent the building of water infrastructure on the Jordanian side or even up in Syria that would prevent certainly in Syria, that would prevent water from reaching the Sea of Galilee and Israel's national water carrier. So the general most important aspect of this proposal is 2 new waterways, not navigable canals. This is not in competition with the Suez Canal, but taking advantage of the fact that the elevation, let's take a look at the elevation map here. The Dead Sea, the Jordan River Valley, is extremely low elevation, -400 meters. This means that by bringing water from the Mediterranean, from the Red Sea, you would be able to address the shrinking of the Dead Sea. You'd be able to make hydroelectricity as the water descends. And along the way, you would be able to have desalination. So the canal, the waterway from the Red Sea up to the Dead Sea, right before it enters the Dead Sea, this would be a great place to desalinate water to send north to Amman, and the brine can be rejected into the Dead Sea, which is already plenty salty. I've been involved in a couple of conferences and discussions with science people from, I'm in the New York City area with science-related people at UN missions of some countries in the region. And the idea of having financing available for this approach, of international requests, international support for what a future could be, I believe can play a very important role, and a role that should not be overlooked in securing peace. I'm not naive enough to think that proposing water development in itself is going to be enough to stop this conflict. Clearly, there are political and cultural issues at play. But much like the Treaty of Westphalia, which in 1648, after 4 years of negotiations, ended the 30 years religious war in Europe, which had a very religious component. Protestants, Catholics is largely how it's understood. The treaty that ended that conflict had 2 main principles. One was that a peace must be achieved in which each country would actually support the interests of the others. And number two, that there was a need for an amnesty, that everything that had been done in the war had to be forgotten, had to be forgiven, a total clean slate, putting everything in the past. It took 4 years of negotiations to work out all of the arrangements, and I think it would be an intense discussion today. But the economic development that the Treaty of Westphalia enabled for the region spoke to the power of achieving a vision for the future. And this, I think, is something that countries like China, the Gulf Cooperation Council nations have huge sovereign wealth funds. This would be, in my view, a useful impulse, a useful proposal coming from other nations that could have an effect in shaping what is deemed to be possible in the region.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Jason, for this interesting proposal. Let me just make a quick comment. I don't think that using nuclear power plants is really a solution, because I think nuclear energy creates more problems than it ever can solve. Perhaps if one wants to follow a way like that, there is a very good example, which is the Sesame synchrotron radiation facility in Jordan, which operates fully on renewable energies. And I think, if at all, then this would be something to consider, especially in that region, but not going for nuclear energies. There's also a similar proposal for the Caribbean. Okay, are there any comments? I see that Rick has raised his hand. Yes, Rick, please.
Yeah, yes, I just want to remind you all that we certainly have a disagreement on the question of peaceful nuclear energy, and you have agreed that we should have a debate at some point in the near future on that, which I think is very important, because the nature of nuclear is so energy so cheap that practically the only thing that would work is in terms of a huge project like this. But this is, we should debate this. There's nothing else to do but work it out.
Okay. Good. So, but let's try to focus back on the thing we came here today for, which is the discussion on the Gaza war and how we can contribute to help ending it, if at all. Are there any other comments, any other remarks on this issue? I must say I found very, very interesting and very important the statements concerning cooperation with institutes, with science institutes in Israel, where people were arguing to stop this cooperation, at least if it is in the spirit of weapon production and supporting of the war. I found that very important statements, and I think we need to think a bit more about what can be done and how that can be achieved. But are there any more comments, any more questions, any more statements on this? I know it's already quite late, but don't see any hands up. Okay, then perhaps this is the time where to stop the discussion today. I found it extremely good and extremely interesting and extremely informative to have this discussion. I'm really very grateful to every speaker, everyone who contributed to this discussion. This was really much more than I was dreaming to expect. So it was really a great discussion and great contribution. I'm sure we will continue this discussion and try to communicate either in the next Scinece4Peace forum meeting or with another dedicated discussion on this topic. I think the story is not over, and we have to consider that in future also. So thanks everybody again for this very good and very important contributions. And with that, I will close the meeting for today. Thanks everybody, and have a nice afternoon, morning, afternoon, evening, and hope to see you soon again in one of our meetings. Thanks a lot, and goodbye then.